All right, welcome to the Monday Review. We were off last week and we're going to pick up today again with Brother Nathan. We're going to talk about a few things that happened in Georgia. And first of all, I want to say that we'll have Vacation Bible School here at the church this week, Monday through Friday. If you can get your kids involved in that, then definitely do. There's lots of things for them to do here. And then now we're going to go into the month of August, and the third full week of August, we'll have our August meeting. Brother Mark McGahee, probably Brother Nathan. We haven't got a decisive answer on that as of yet, but we're going to have some great guys there preaching. Have Brother Andrew Soche, Mark McGahee. We'll have Brother Jim Chandler, lots of other guys like that. Brother Samson Ryman will be there a day or two, I think. And so lots of guys, Gary Lutrick, different fellows like that, people coming in from all over the place. And we're planning on having the service in the gym because it looks like we're going to have an extra large crowd this year. So everybody welcome to come to that. I'm sure there'll be plenty of good preaching that you can take advantage of. All right, Brother Nathan, we've talked a couple of times about the work in Brunswick. Let's talk about how things are going over there, first of all.
Well, since we talked last, we got, I think, two or three more families. They're basically folks that were at the church beforehand, but they're coming around now. We've got a big sign out in front of the church that has the service times posted and whatnot. So they're coming, but much other than that, it's just steady church services is all there is to it.
Business as usual. Anybody starting to show signs of wanting to pick up like a regular service, like on Sunday night, Sunday morning? Anybody talked about that yet?
Well, nobody has instigated the subject to me. I have instigated the subject to the folks that are still members there at the church. It was basically held together by three elderly ladies. And so I just pulled them off to the side. It's probably been about 2 weeks ago, maybe not even that, maybe a week and a half ago. And I just told them, I said, listen, this church would probably not be sustained very long having just two services, one on Sunday and one on Thursday night. I said, so we need to start praying. I said, you need to start praying for me, praying that God will give me understanding and wisdom, pray that the Lord will send a fella by to where we could start having more services, to where we could get this into a normal church as far as service times go. And they agreed wholeheartedly. Yeah, we can't just have Sunday afternoon service, because it's a struggle as far as trying to get traction, trying to preach 2 times a week compared to having Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And then on the other hand, for another church, having a Sunday afternoon and a Thursday evening. It's difficult to get traction trying to lay some groundwork and get established.
Yeah.
About the time you feel like you're getting started, the week is over. So it's
right.
It's a challenge.
Now, I've been thinking about the thing. Now, when you first said, we're going to try to open that church back up in Brunswick, there's a fleshly side of things. I don't really want to say carnal, but there's a fleshly side of things to where I'm super excited about that. And I'd be willing to come down there and help. There's that side of things, but then you have to pray for God's direction. I understand that God give a man the desires of his heart, and that God will work into a man the desire. If any man desire the office of a bishop, he desires the good thing. Well, it always amazed me that verse didn't say if any man was called to be a bishop.
Right.
Any man desired to be a bishop. And so there's definitely a desire there. But I will say over the last week during the church services itself, there wasn't just a desire to do it. I felt like the Lord was now speaking to me about doing it, coming, making a way for me to get down there and help you out with the thing. And so with a little more prayer, I believe that's the direction that we're going, and be glad to help you out with those things. But also I think in my mind, I'm thinking about a couple of guys that go to church here that could come and help you out for, like, say, a weekend or something like that. And surely we know enough guys that are not pastors that the thing could be worked out. Maybe not this month or next month, but to where you could eventually get some regular services going on,
Sure.
and where you could either be there in Brunswick on Sunday while somebody's filling the pulpit at Folkestone, or vice versa. But that, a lot of potential. When you say a couple of more families, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful, man. That's real good. And for all the things that you've been through over the last couple of weeks, man, that's a couple of families started coming back to church. That's massive.
Yeah.
That's massive. And I understand you know, some things going on there at Folkestone that's a little disheartening perhaps. But I would put those things in the balance and see if they won't even one another out. It's
Sure.
a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. And listen, I think you, just like me, not going to hold grudges over
Sure.
bad things that have happened, or bad circumstances, or bad outcomes. And you and I both, especially with certain people, we want them to thrive. We want them to grow in grace. We want their kids to come out on top. From time to time, churches run into problems, but at the same time, this other church is coming up, and that's a great thing. I bet, you know, I don't put much stock in people, you know, in heaven being able to see what's going on. You know, I don't apply that Hebrews chapter 12 like a lot of people do, but I'm sure if the Lord told Brother Danny what's going on, I'm sure he shouted about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, that guy, Danny Hall, got a lot invested in that church, whether he spent a long time there or not. You know, he had some circumstances there that he didn't forget for the rest of his life, and his wife's still alive. She hadn't forgot what went on there either. And to know that a Bible believer is in there preaching that thing's coming up,
Yeah.
outstanding.
Yeah. We went to youth camp out in Alabama last week, or it might have been the week before. I think it was probably the week before. And we saw Sister Dee Dee Hall there at camp. She was there. And so I had already mentioned something to Brother Mark about taking the church. And Miss Dee Dee was staying at Brother Mark and Miss Dee's house. And so he had said something to her about it. And so when I saw her at camp on Monday, she came straight to me. She said, "I heard you're pastoring 2 churches now." I said, "Yeah, you could say that." And so I told her what church it was. She said, "Really?" So it was, we talked about it for a little while. So, you know, we obviously, they got some history there. So I was trying to catch up. And one of the ladies that's there now, she knows, Sister Dee Dee knows who it is. And so that we were swapping hellos between party lines.
Oh,
So,
sure.
but
That's good. That's good. So the camp out there, that's Brother Mark's camp. I think it's at Brother Wood's campground, but Brother Mark and man, the other guy's name just slipped right off of my tongue.
Rick Drummond.
Brother Drummond. Yeah, sorry to Brother Drummond, but your name just slipped off my tongue. But that's the camp they put on at that campground. Like I say, I think it's Brother Wood's campground.
Right.
And he has sons. I praying for that guy. I pray for Brother Wood because I don't know his first name, but I know his sons are Daniel and Tony, I believe.
Right.
And yeah, try to pray for those guys on a regular basis. But at any rate, it's in what's the name of the town it's in?
It's
is it
just
right in
outside
Pell
of
City?
right outside of Pell City, in a little community called Raglan.
Yeah.
But it's just outside of Pell City.
So how'd that go? You took, how many kids did you take with you?
There was excluding my family, actual teenagers, there was only four teenagers that went, but then it was four teenagers, my three kids, and then my wife, I, and Miss Joyce. And Heidi and I and our kids, we had to come home so that we could be home for the Brunswick service on Thursday. So we left Wednesday night after church service up there. And but the services that we were there, it was really good. We enjoyed it. Wednesday night kind of broke loose, so to speak. Things got a little out of the banks. Some teenagers running the aisle, and as a matter of fact, I was really surprised. I wasn't like a little surprised. I was utterly shocked. Some of our teenagers
How
were
about
running the
that?
aisles. We took one fella and real shy, real backwards. And if he listened to this, he'd know exactly that I was talking about him. But he was real shy, and he didn't run the aisles that night. But boy, I saw him getting involved in the services. I was enjoying it. I was sitting in the back, and I enjoyed watching him get involved. And I was told before the weekend was over, he was running the aisles.
That's good.
Did me a lot of good. And that young fella came back and spoke to me and told me he feels like the Lord's calling him to preach.
Yeah, you may as well just dime him out and tell us what his name is.
Wyatt Curtin.
Okay, Wyatt. Good.
Yep.
That's good. Them boys both got in not too long ago, so that's good.
Yeah.
They're growing. That's good. And his daddy Mike probably proud too.
Oh yeah. We had a good service when we came back on Sunday. People were shouting. Here, I'd let the kids get up on Sunday morning and just say whatever they wanted to say, which can be dangerous, but
Yeah.
these it's not dangerous because they're so shy. And that's okay. I don't mind. I kind of empathize with that a little bit.
Yeah, me
They
too.
got up and gave a little word of testimony about, what they learned at camp and what the Lord had done in their hearts. And I was really proud, man. My heart swelled up real big about, just them being able to get up and say something, be a little bit outspoken, and had a good service. Had a real good service on that Sunday. Folks crying, weeping all over the place. So it was good. I really enjoyed it. I know the folks here enjoyed it too.
Yeah, don't be afraid to fan the flames and
Oh,
stuff like
sure.
that. I think maybe you could and I just said fan the flames. I think there is a certain personality that could probably pump that stuff up all the time. Praise is comely all the time. It's always right to shout and say, man, but you can get to the place where you can instigate shouting and stuff like that to where people will be up here shouting, but mentally they'll be down here underneath, a lot of stuff going on. But those times where people are going along steady and then they overflow and get up here real high, and it's not just the outward, they're up here for real. Those are few and far between. So fanning the flames to keep it going as long as possible. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I'm a believer in shouting and old time religion and all that stuff. I just want it to be as real as possible, as much as possible. And if you want to throw in some emphatic amens just for on credit, that's fine. And it probably ain't going to hurt much.
That's right.
Not much. So, Brother Mark, describe Brother Mark. Brother Mark preached out there. What did Brother Mark preach on? Just one sermon?
Oh man. Well, actually, the Wednesday night that things got out of the banks, he was preaching about it. He preached that message. It better be real about Pop Coleman.
Oh yeah.
And so that story about Pop Coleman getting up in the front of the church there at Faith Baptist in Delaware and shaking his hand. I don't know if he was walking or running or whatever. I wasn't there, but he tells the story of it. That's right. It better be real. It better be real. So yeah, he preached that. I actually preached that night. I preached first, but then Brother Mark preached, and that was what he preached. And yeah, it proceeded from there.
Yeah,
I just in the couple of days that we were there, I can't remember how many kids got saved. I think 5, 6, something like that. 5. And that
that's
was
good.
just between Monday and Wednesday. I don't know if any more got saved Thursday and Friday. So
That's
a lot
real
of
good.
kids got assurance of their salvation.
That's real good. That's
Yeah,
real good, man.
it was a good week. I really enjoyed it. Lord willing, we're gonna try and go next year all week. And something that was good that came out of that, actually something that I'm kind of excited about. It's not really super spiritual, but there at camp they had a concession stand after the services. You know, they feed everybody 3 meals a day, and then after the services at night they have a concession stand. And you know, I don't know what that money goes towards, but when we came home, I think Miss Joyce mentioned it to me about us doing it here at the church, because you know the kids try to raise money for camp to go. You know, if we got to rent a van or pay for gas or whatnot, so they'll do car washes and all that kind of stuff. So she mentioned something to me about doing a concession stand on Sunday nights, maybe twice a month. And so we actually started it last night. So we got to move it. It's going to be uh, after the second and fourth Sunday evening services. And it's just a small assortment of stuff, nachos and cheese, you know, chips and nacho cheese, and then, you know, nacho supreme and candy bars. Go buy the stuff at Sam's and split it up and sell it after the service. And it serves 2 purposes. It lets folks fellowship after church, and it raises money for the kids at camp, and the kids work the booth.
You're gonna have to come with some hot dogs, man.
Oh, we can do that.
Man, hot
Hey,
dogs.
hey, I was looking on oh, it's funny. I was looking on a website, and they've got hot
Come
dog
down from the
steamers.
heavens.
Yeah, they got hot dog steamers, man. You can cook the hot dogs and keep the buns warm all at the same time.
Oh yeah. Them if you get one of those roller things
Yeah.
like the convenience stores have, you got to keep those things clean though, man. Those things
Oh yeah.
get nasty. But
Yeah.
I mean, keep them clean. I mean, put some elbow grease in them and clean them up. But yeah, man, because I'm not messing with a concession stand that don't have a hot dog. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Man,
I think we just decided what I'm having for dinner today.
yeah. See?
Hot dogs. We got VBS this week, so
Oh, praise
you
the
know,
Lord.
Ruth gets off of work at 5 o'clock, so
Sure.
I don't think we're gonna have much time for suppers this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good message by Brother Mark. I think probably heard that 10 times. I might could preach that message,
Yeah.
by the way, but nobody could do it like Brother Mark does. Brother Mark's a good one. So I'm thinking in the back of my mind, you and I were talking beforehand about, you know, a month-long revival. I think you got somebody scheduled for October. Or am I thinking about somebody else?
That's Brother Mark. Brother Mark, we just scheduled Brother Mark for October. And so that's the only thing that we've got for the rest
You
of
got
the
some
year.
dates?
October, I think it's the week of the 10th. I'm almost positive it's the week of the 10th.
Yeah, that sounds good because Brother Mark's always a good one for revival. Always a good one for revival meet. I don't know if he's back to 100% as far as his schedule goes or not. And I'm afraid the way things are looking right now, Canada might close back down to him. Who knows? Looks like you're freezing a little bit. Yeah, I was just saying that looks like Brother Mark might run into some trouble with this resurgence of the COVID stupidity. If they close down Canada or something, he might be out of a few meetings. But I was just, you know, talking about, I didn't know if Brother Mark was back into the full swing of a full schedule or not. So I'm praying that he gets back there if he's not, but I hadn't talked with him in a couple months myself.
Yeah, I don't know. I know when I booked this meeting with him in October, he was talking about September and October kind of being slower months, it seemed like. So it works out well for us. It's probably better that we don't have him in during the summer, because this building it's a real pain to cool during the summer. And
Yeah.
we manage, but boy, it doesn't take the door to swing open a couple of times, and the air conditioning's beginning to struggle.
Yeah, that might be your next physical project that you go through there. Y'all did a good job on the fellowship hall.
Yeah, well, we've still got some stuff to be finished on that, but the thing that we're working on right now is a roof for the fellowship hall. So, and as a matter of fact, talking with the treasurer, I think we've just about got the money to pay somebody to come in and do it. So,
Who do you got? I mean, that could do it in the church.
nobody. I mean, I don't really have anybody in the church that we would
Yeah.
get together and do it.
Maybe me and Alan will talk about coming down there and putting it on, but it have to be in a cooler month. We don't want to put it on. We don't want to put on a roof in South Georgia in July or August. And we're in August now, not even August, or November for that matter. No, November would probably be a good time to do it.
Yeah, not unless you want to fry like an egg, man. It's very warm. It's been very brutal for the last week or so. I feel my heart goes out to Brother Tommy operating on them lawnmowers.
Right.
They cutting grass for a living. So,
all right, let's talk about, let's go back to Brunswick. You have services on Sunday, a service on Sunday in Brunswick.
right.
And you already told us that you had a few families come back in. We talked maybe 3 weeks ago about the type of stuff you're preaching. I imagine you're still going along the same, I don't want to say low level, but the same elementary type of preaching over there.
Right. Yeah. Yesterday was a little bit of a divergence from the norm. Yesterday, I actually preached in Brunswick the same message that I preached here in Folkestone, but it turned out totally different. And I knew it would. I didn't really intend. I went off of the same set of notes, the same outline, I guess you could say, but I don't know how to explain it. Same thought, but approaching it from different avenues. And so yesterday I preached out of 2 Peter chapter 1, talking about grace and peace be multiplied unto you, and talking about how that basically the gist of the message, the title of the message was multiplication problems. And I talked about in the introduction, in both places, I talked about how that in multiplication, you can't start with multiplication without having the basics of mathematics down. And I'm no math whiz, so I kind of tried to play on that a little bit, because math is not my favorite subject. But I do know that in order to get to multiplication, you've got to be able to count, and you have to understand the concept of addition. The very concept of multiplying is taking a number and adding it to itself. 2 times 3 is 2 plus 2 plus 2. And so there's a concept there. Yeah, that's really deep. But at the same time, that verse says grace and peace be multiplied. And so I used that foundation to talk about the fact that the reason that people, in a general sense, the reason that they can't have grace and peace multiplied is because they don't have grace and peace to start with.
Right.
But when you go into verse 1, he talks about a like precious faith. And that's where the grace and peace comes first. It comes through the faith.
Right.
And so then from there, well, how does it get multiplied? Well, it's through the knowledge of God. and then according as his divine power. So those are basically my 2 points, talking about knowing the Lord and how at the same time, simultaneously, you're trying to know the Lord and God is working on the inside of a man so that he can have that grace and peace multiplied. So
Mhm.
anyways, that was the gist of the message. It kind of turned out totally different. The message up in Brunswick really turned out to be more of a salvation message. So it was really more geared towards what the faith is. It's not, faith in works. It's faith in what Jesus Christ did for us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Preaching, besides the fact of all that stuff, I mean, you lost me a little bit on the math. When you started talking about multiplication and addition, my mind went off to shooting 1911s and 9mm. And no, no, in all seriousness, you mentioned about preaching a message in Folkestone and then preaching it in Brunswick right after, and it being two different things.
Yeah.
I think that there are some messages from when I was in Folkestone that stand out in my mind that really will probably stick with me for the rest of my life, that I'll try to preach anywhere that I do go. But listen to it during the course of a week. It's on the Folkestone website. I mean, not the website, but the sermon audio. As I'm listening to it, I'm thinking to myself, this absolutely could never be recreated. I didn't really have a sermon outline for him to begin with. Excuse me. But you know the material, you know what you're talking about. You preach a message 5 times, you're probably going to get 5 different results. And the emphasis, to me, it seems like when I start preaching about a subject, it seems like your mind goes to a certain place. When you preach the message the first time, the first verse you talked about led you to some place. The next time you preach it, you get to that second verse, and that second verse takes you somewhere else. They're all going to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I preach a message. I remember a message you preached out of Colossians down in Folkestone. That it was a game changer for me. Set your affection on things above. And I came to you and I said, man, you need to preach that same message next week. I had you preach it the next week, hoping that it would be the same, because for some reason we didn't hit record on that sermon. And that sermon is lost to history. In my opinion, it was one of the great sermons. And not trying to blow your head up, but the next week when you preached it again, it wasn't the same. No. It wasn't a bad sermon. It wasn't an insignificant sermon. It just wasn't the sermon that it was the week before. And it was just not hitting record is a great regret. I think about that all the time. But like I say, you learn over the course of time that each sermon that you preach has this life of its own. And just like there's no two people the same, even me and my brothers have similarities. You and your brother has similarities, but you're not the same. And that's something to think about in preaching a sermon. Like if you were a great evangelist and you preached the sermon around 500 places, I'd be a little bit afraid if somebody come in, heard me read my text verse and, say the title of the sermon. Oh, I heard this, and therefore I'm not interested.
Right.
But that's another thing we're talking about, Brother Mark. He preaches the same message all the time, but it always seems to be a little bit of a different slant. In the course of a sermon, you might talk about 5 or 6 things, but one of those things will be the emphasis that sticks in the mind of a person. And so there are evangelists though that preach the same messages all the time. If you heard it in 1978 and you heard it in 2008, it's the same thing. That's what we call scripted.
Right.
That's a scripted type of a sermon. Not, uh, not without value,
Sure.
but it is what it is.
Right.
So, yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
and
there's a
so-
lot of factors that
Right.
go into preaching to a congregation of folks. I actually mentioned something about that. I think it may have been yesterday. If it wasn't yesterday, it was Wednesday night. I was preaching about the fact that when a preacher stands up to preach, there's a two-way connection, for lack of a better way to explain it, between the preacher and the congregation. And that's not the only factor I think that makes the sermon different. You can preach the same sermon different places or the same church at different times. You know, as a matter of fact, Brother Mark, he's a great example. Brother Mark has preached here years ago when I was a kid. He preached a message called Should Have Submitted.
Yeah, that's a
And
good one.
then that was back when Dad was pastoring, my dad. And then he preached it again, I think, when you were pastoring here. Different. They're different. They were same
Mhm.
outline, same message, but different, different messages overall. And, there's just so many factors that go into that. And, I think that obviously it goes without saying, it's an obvious statement. The congregation is one of those factors.
Sure.
The maturity of the congregation is one of those factors. Same people, different spot in their walk with the Lord.
Sure. No
So,
doubt about it.
very,
Let's take a little bit of a different turn here. This just entered my mind, but do a lot of things unscripted, so may as well follow this as if it come down from the heavens. I was talking this past week with a young man in our church, and I think we've probably got a couple of young men that are probably right at this place, called to preach, want to preach, active in visitation, different things like that, just raring to go. And the question comes up, should I quit my job? Should I, rush into it? I mean, the advice that I ultimately give them, and some people would like me to say, set them down and say, this is not your time. Don't quit your job. Don't. I sympathize with that, but at the same time, I'm never going to advise somebody not to follow the Lord, not to do what they think the Lord wants them to do. I'm not a totalitarian when it comes to the will of God. Thou shalt do this right now. Thou shalt move to Columbia right now and start a church. I don't follow that logic when it comes to the will of God. But the advice that I gave him, make a long story short, the advice that I gave him was like the guys in the Old Testament who wanted to go and tell David. One was sent, the other wanted to go.
Yeah.
The guy that got there didn't really have anything to say. And so I went along those lines and I said, well, you got the zeal right now. You've got the ability to witness right now. You're bringing people in from work. They're getting saved. And so you're at a high spot right now. I didn't say this to him because I didn't think of it at the time, but this high spot where he's got people coming to church with him and getting saved could drop back off to a dry spell, which we all have. Sometimes people accept their witness. Most of the time people do not. So my whole thought process was it's the zeal is good. The intentions are good. Knowing that you're called is good, but not knowing what your gifts are, not knowing what God's going to use you for, not knowing if you're going to be an evangelist or a pastor or a teacher, all of those things, which it's logical to, quit digging ditches and start preaching, start pastoring, whatever the case might, all those things are logical. But without knowing which one of those, what God's going to use you for, then work while you've got a job, save money because there are going to be a lot more rainy days
sure.
when you're dependent on the ministry. for your finances.
Right.
So that's the advice I gave him. I don't need to talk any more about that. So talk to a guy who is ready to go in the ministry now, and give just a little bit of your thoughts on that as a guy who has sat as a second man working a job, biting the bits or biting against the reins to get out there and get into full-time ministry yourself, because I know that you're familiar with those thoughts and stuff. Maybe give a few pieces of advice about that.
Well, I don't know. I feel like, in a way, I feel like maybe I had a little bit of a different approach towards some of that stuff. When I first came to this church, there's a history behind how I became the youth pastor and the assistant pastor. Basically, I got into the assistant pastorate, and when I first took that, I really wasn't sure what to expect, and I didn't really feel like maybe I was doing everything that I should do. And I never really said a whole lot about this stuff as the assistant pastor, but I did want to go full time, and I felt like that was what the Lord wanted me to do. I felt like since I was 16 or 17, the Lord wanted me to do something in the ministry. So I started talking to my wife about praying to go somewhere, leaving Peoples and go somewhere. And we never said anything to the rest of the church about that. We were just praying about that. And I forget how it all really rolled out, but I do remember one distinct service to where you got up and said some things, and I don't really know what prompted it all, but you had said some things and basically just issued some direction. At that point in here in the church, there was about 4 different preachers that were all here part of the church. And it was one of those kind of things where a message was preached before the real message of the service. And it was a concept of, basically, to summarize, splitting preachers up is not always the most effective way to get a ministry done. People have this idea of, well, there's 4 preachers in a church. Why are all 4 preachers there in one church? They all need to be in different churches ministering. They all need their own separate churches, or 3 preachers need to go pastor 3 churches and the other preacher needs to be an evangelist. And basically those comments that you made were, I think, some timely comments that the Lord led you to say for whatever reason. And that got me thinking about that. And so when that was said, I made I prayed about it and made the decision to just from that point on to just stay at the church where I was. I had a good job. The Lord was providing for me and my family. We weren't rolling in money, but we were doing fine. We didn't lack for anything to eat. Anything that we wanted to eat, the Lord let us have. And so we just made the decision to stay and just try and help somebody else succeed. And ironically, when we made that decision, the Lord really started opening some doors for me to preach on a regular basis. And the Lord started blessing my personal Bible study. I had been reading the Bible and I had been praying on a regular basis. But when we made that decision, I remember distinctly, it was almost like a switch was flipped. And I started, what looked like to me, started getting better messages to preach when I did preach. And it wasn't too much longer after that, maybe a couple of months, I started praying and I said, Lord, I'd really like to have an opportunity to minister on a regular basis. I'm content with being an assistant pastor for the rest of my life. But if preaching is what I'm supposed to be doing, I know that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. At least I feel like I'm called to preach. I would really like a nursing home or a radio program or a prison ministry. I was working at a prison. I said a prison ministry, something to where I could preach on a regular basis. And within 2 weeks of praying that prayer, my associate warden pulled me in the office and said, hey, one of our chaplains has throat cancer. Would you mind filling in for him, on a part-time basis? And from there, within a year, I was in the chaplain's office full-time as a chaplain, making better money better benefits. I mean, it started just being rolled out, man. And then did that for 2 years and then landed as the pastor here. So I think the direction, the advice of, when a guy gets it in his heart, I really agree with you. I'm not interested in being a tyrant as far as the will of God is concerned, one way or another. Uh, but at the same time, I do believe that there is something certainly to be said for, I've got this in my heart. I believe that this is what the Lord wants me to do. I don't know if it's right now or if it'll be at some point in the future. Okay, well, until the Lord opens that door, wherever it is that you're at, look for opportunities right there. There's a lot of guys I think that are looking for doors of opportunity to get into quote unquote full-time ministry, which I have nothing to say against. But there are little ministries, quote unquote, that need to be taken advantage of right where you're at. There's nursing homes that need to be preached at, and it's not glamorous and the pay's not there. But if what you really want to do is serve the Lord, man, there's an opportunity there. And while you're doing that, the Lord can teach you some things. The Lord can help you. I was talking to a young guy up at Brother Rick Drummond's church. I think he's the assistant pastor. And he made a comment to me. I think Brother Drummond is letting him teach Sunday school. Brother Watkins is his name, a good brother. And I was talking to him about, he's teaching Sunday school, and he said, through this process, he said, I'm really learning. And he made the statement, he said, I'm learning how to come into my own as far as who I am as a preacher. And I never really thought about it that way, but that's really a good way of verbalizing things. I think you made the comment, maybe not during this little review, this Monday review, but you kind of have to learn how to be yourself as a preacher. And
Sure.
I think a lot of that can be established by, it sounds carnal, it sounds fleshly, but having the practice of preaching where you're at, in somebody else's church, operating as an arm of your local church. You're not a pastor yet, but you're doing something, you're laboring where you're at. It's a grand opportunity to be able to learn, to prepare for something else in the future. I don't think you should preach in a nursing home or preach at a prison just so that you can look at it and say, well, this would be an opportunity for me to be promoted in the future. You should be. I think that was really a valuable lesson that I learned being here at Peoples, was getting to the place to where I was willing to just be an assistant pastor for the rest of my life. And to be honest with you, I'm still at that place. I got a lot of respect for a guy like Glenn Stocker, I've heard him make the statement twice, I don't have to be a pastor. If the Lord wanted me to go fly airplanes for a living, I'd go do that. And I really feel the same way. I don't have to be a pastor. I'm willing to be somebody's assistant. I'm willing to be a Sunday school teacher. I'm willing to go work a job and tithe in somebody else's church if that's what the Lord wants me to do.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, one fella asked me when I come up here, why would you come up here to do this? Right. If you pastor a church, why would you do that? Well, you see, I hear people say all the time, God doesn't need me. God just uses me by grace. God's will be done. I'm nothing, don't listen to me, listen to God. I hear people say that all the time, but I don't see a lot of people that's willing to move on and let somebody else take over the ministry. Whatever, I just don't see that happen on a regular basis. And to me, that's the greatest form of humility that a man can have. I believe that I have something to say. I believe I've learned some things in this life. I believe I've learned some things out of the Bible. I believe that the Lord's given me a good enough mind to put those things together. And maybe I have to say it 10 times before I know how to say it the very best way, but eventually I'll get to the best way of relating a thing. But the Lord can use another guy to do it just as well. If the Lord opens a door to go somewhere else, then if I was doing things right in the first place, then somebody's going to be there that's going to be able to move into my spot. Somebody can move into my spot if I've been doing things the right way. And so it's a very good position of humility just to realize that. And a lot, I have to be in the ministry because God needs me to do this. Well, God does need you to do that, but he can also use somebody else to do that. And there are preachers that I know of that have picked up on opportunities that I believe that the Lord at some point gave me the opportunity to be this person. I mean, God used a lot of different people. And for some reason or another, I just decided that I didn't want to be that exact individual. And for example, I know a preacher, every time he preaches this same way. A lot of people like to hear him preach, and he's a blessing. I like to hear him preach, and he's a blessing. But there was a time, 10 years ago when I could have got into that same line and been that same person. And I know the guy today, and I see him now, and I see what he is, and I see who God is using him to be. But there was a place in my mind where I don't want to be that guy. I want to preach like a house on fire for 3 or 4 weeks, and I want to settle way down and teach. And I don't want to be this same person every time I come to the pulpit or open my mouth.
Yeah.
I want to be who I am, which I might be irate one week.
Yeah.
Next week, okay, let's slow down. And so I think once a guy gets into a character, he has to be that character for the rest of his life. But that's just not the way it is. I mean, you got, like you said, and like I've said a bunch of times, you got to be yourself. You got to have something to say once you get the opportunity to say it. And I said all that other stuff to say this. We did have 4 or 5 guys to preach. And it sounds like at People's, we had 4 or 5 guys that could preach. Any week, if I would have said, hey, brother, preach next week, any one of those guys would have said yes.
Yeah.
But on a week by week basis, and this is what sounds like arrogance, I felt like in my heart that as the pastor and as a guy that knew these things that I was thinking about, it was my responsibility to be the one to speak to that congregation. And so while you guys got opportunities to preach while I was there, you didn't get an overabundance of opportunities to preach. And that can have pros and cons. And, at some point I brought all the teenagers into the adult Sunday school class because I felt like they needed what the pastor of that church, let's just forget for a minute that it was me, they needed what the pastor. Now, if you think about it's going to be this way, it's been this way for a long time, but if you think about it, we have Christians who are now either falling out of church when they're 18, or they're going into the ministry or feel like they're called into the ministry in their teenage years, but it's taken them till they're 35, 40 years old to get into the ministry. And it might be because that when they were 10, they were getting taught by a 20-year-old. Or when they were 10 years old, they were being Sunday schooled by somebody who had the spiritual acumen of somebody that had been saved a year, 2 years, 3 years. You're basically having children teach children. And no parent's going to send their kid to an elementary school that's being taught by a 12-year-old. It's just not logical.
Sure.
And so church used to be everybody in the congregation got taught and got preached to by an elder.
Yeah.
And as a result, guys like, just off the top of my head, Bob Jones had a preaching ministry while he was in his teenage years. But where did he get that? Did God miracle that knowledge in his head? No, he was being taught by elders, by mature men. And I felt like that was not just something that should be. I mean, I felt I know better than brother so-and-so, so I'm going to teach this group of people. That's not it at all. It's that the time had been spent in studying and the position had been granted by God as a pastor. So it's my responsibility. It's almost like Paul says, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. It's very dangerous for a pastor who has to give an account for his flock when he turns over the responsibility of those people's Christian education to somebody that's not able. And there had to be a time in my life when I came to the realization, why should I, as a 26, 27-year-old man, why should I covet the opportunity to instruct this group of people when there's an older, wiser man who should be doing it? Are they going to be better off if I teach them, or are they going to be better off if Pastor so-and-so teaches them? And that's something that every man has to wrestle with. And so that goes back to what we're talking about, young guys getting into the ministry. If you're ready, I'm not a naysayer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of naysayers out there, which basically just equates to, you know, if you do that, you'll be taking something away from me. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But I'm a yes sayer. I'm a yay sayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
For guys to get into the ministry when they're ready and when they're prepared. And we've got some younger guys in the church that can, whenever they get an opportunity to preach, they preach great messages, well thought out, well digested messages. Some of them are hit and miss.
Yeah.
Some of them pretty much deliver every time. You feel good about those things. You really do when you preach a great message. Okay, you got to do that same thing next week. And you got to do the same thing Sunday night and the same thing Wednesday night. It becomes difficult.
Yes, it does.
And zeal doesn't equate to substance.
Very true.
You got to have both.
Yeah.
You got to have both. I'll give you the last word. We don't want to make this thing 2 hours long today. So whatever you want to say about your revival or services, prayer needs, whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say. Just keep us in prayer. Got a lot of stuff going on, and trying to that little thing about, you know, trying to come up with, and you didn't say it this way, but in my mind, it kind of translates to the idea of trying to come up with something to say, well thought out and with some vigor. Boy, it is a challenge. It is a challenge when you start trying to preach, you know, 4 times, you know, preach 3 times a week and then teach once. It's a challenge. So
yeah, it's bad. I'm struggling here. I mean, I've always had trouble on Mondays, even as a pastor when I was preaching every week. But I am so out of the groove, man. I mean, while I'm preaching, there are things in my head that's like a teletype.
Yeah.
But to get in sync with that teletype and say it the way you're thinking it, man, by the time I was at People's for 5 years, it was just like falling into a groove, getting a train on a track. Start the engine and hit go, and it'll go right to its destination. I am so out of the groove, preaching one Sunday a month and preaching Sunday school every week. It's a terror to my mind. And I preached all day yesterday, and by the end of the day, Sunday school went well. Sunday morning went well. I thought I had great liberty. Sunday night was like a punch in the face, man. And by the end of the sermon, some of that's the devil. Some of it's, you know, some of it's, you know, your own lack of preparation. Some of it's the devil telling you it ain't no good. I understand all that. I've been dealing with that for the last 12, 13 years. But there's that, and there's the fact that I am out of the groove.
Absolutely.
I think the first time I figured out I was out of the groove was at our January revival down there with you last year. It's like nothing coming. Normally, and the word said, and God said, what did he say? So it's pretty rough, man. Yeah, so I'll take some prayer on that, and we'll be praying for you down there, Brunswick, Folkston, all the things you got coming up, and I'll talk to Brother Allen about that roof for you.
All right.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.